Welcome to Lesson 7 on Patterns Changed by AI. We'll explain Black's bump and hang down, following a one-space jump corner, approach, and underneath attachment at the 3 to 4 point. In the old human patterns, this specific move by Black is what triggers the classic avalanche pattern. After Black hangs down, if White chooses to hang at this position, it forms the small avalanche. If White makes a solid extension here, it forms the large avalanche. Besides these two options for White, human players would also choose a descent or a solid connection. First, let's look at the descent. After White makes the descent, Black must make a solid extension, and then White crawls twice. This sequence has indeed appeared in human games. However, AI considers White's next clamp to be a move that results in a loss. And this move was also part of the old human patterns. Black blocks down here, White clamps, and Black makes a descent. Alright, up to here, White extends and Black turns down. So, AI believes this entire sequence after White's clamp leads to a loss. What is the correct move? White should play elsewhere directly, for example, a 3 to 3 point invasion. Alright, this is where AI's evaluation conflicts with the old human approach regarding the descent. This move is playable, however, AI suggests not to clamp anymore. Then, a more significant variation is the small avalanche. In the traditional understanding of old human patterns, we believed that playing the small avalanche depends on the black stone in the top right. When Black has a favorable ladder, this small avalanche fight occurs. When White makes a turn, if Black has a favorable ladder, Black's solid extension here will lead to a favorable fight for Black. However, from an AI perspective, AI does not agree with this. After Black's solid extension, White can no longer crawl here. Black can cut and kill White's 2 stones. Since White has an unfavorable ladder here, these 2 stones are already cut and dead, which makes Black quite satisfied. Therefore, White should block or make a solid extension exchange before blocking. Next, Black cuts, and White plays an Atari and crawls. This is also the correct move for White, suggested by AI. Next, Black makes a solid extension and White clamps to kill. This local area will develop into a fight. According to past human judgment, this fight was considered clearly favorable for Black. However, from AI's perspective, the chances are 50-50, and this fight is completely playable for White. Alright, then Black will choose different moves depending on the specific situation. For example, in the current situation, Black might push, make a solid extension, and jump out. In other cases, Black might just jump. Choosing to fight with the push move is probably a bit more common. AI believes this variation is playable for both sides. So here, first of all, there is a major conflict with the previous human understanding of the small avalanche pattern. Human players used to believe that when Black has a favorable ladder, if Black's solid extension works, the resulting fight is clearly favorable for Black. However, AI considers this fight to be completely even for both sides. Next, Let's look at the tiger's mouth pattern variation. When the latter is unfavorable, black can only choose the tiger's mouth. In other words, this is a relatively basic small avalanche pattern played by humans. In this specific variation, AI and humans have a massive difference in opinion. AI believes the human's Atari pattern is clearly a bad choice. Next, black cuts, white captures and plays an Atari, and black runs out with the keystone. Our old pattern was to capture, and black captures. AI thinks this result is clearly better for black. Therefore, we can say this variation has been completely phased out by AI. AI suggests that, at this moment, white should choose either an attachment or a solid extension. Looking at it with AI now, it seems the attachment is played much more frequently. Then, black makes a solid extension. White can either block first or make a solid extension first, playing out like this. Next, black cuts. White plays an Atari, and black makes a solid extension. For the next move, the human approach and AI's approach are completely different from each other. In the past, humans would always clamp and capture in the corner at this point. Then black turns, white captures, black extends, and white chooses to develop on the outside. For example, playing a cage here, or really. There are various ways to play it. However, AI considers white's move to capture the two stones in the corner to be a loss. This is a fascinating point, and you could even say it completely overturns the previous judgment of human players. AI believes white absolutely must crawl here. Next, black plays an Atari and blocks in the corner. White can only choose a solid extension. Humans had actually seen this variation before. But humans believed that after black's attachment in the corner, white is actually no longer able to kill black stones in the corner. Looking at the battle for life in the corner, if white wants to kill black, white must play a placement here. After black blocks, it already forms a KO locally. If white plays an angle wedge here, it is also a massive KO. Therefore, human players believed that white would never dare to play this crawl at this moment. Because after the crawl, black's two stones in the corner would come back to life. However, AI demonstrated its incredibly powerful judgment ability here. AI believes white should simply sacrifice the corner. Next, white chooses to play a hen on the outside. If black captures the corner and white fixes the shape on the outside, AI considers this trait to be favorable for white. It is much better than the previous variation of clamping and capturing on the second line. This pattern has had a massive impact on the old human patterns, completely changing the idea by sacrificing the corner. Besides, white choosing the attachment and opting for this trait, the solid extension is also an old human approach. Next, black will generally stretch here, white blocks, and black cuts. Now, white can crawl one more time. This block move is not viable because white can play a knight's move on the outside. Black must make a solid extension, and then white clamps. In the past, humans considered this fight to be roughly even. but according to AI, this fight is slightly favorable for white. Next up, another old pattern that humans used to love playing is to jump right here. White attaches out, then plays an Atari here. Black plays an Atari, and then jumps. Then, white presses. Black plays a knight's move, and white plays a knight's move out here. This was also a pattern variation that was once quite popular among human players. However, based on AI's judgment, this results in a loss for black. Therefore, AI believes that black should simply jump out towards the outside here. Then white pushes out and black continues to jump. If white makes a solid extension, black plays a diagonal move. If white attaches, black calmly makes a solid extension. In this scenario, the fight should be slightly better for white. Finally, let's discuss a question regarding pattern selection. We all know that after a high approach and underneath attachment at the 3 to 4 point, black has two directional choices. One is to hold and pull back on the left. In this attach and pull back pattern, black chooses to develop on the left. The other is to bump and hang at the bottom, emphasizing development at the bottom. These are two different directions. Therefore, when humans were choosing patterns, we believed that bumping and hanging for the bottom or hanging for the left was entirely black's privilege to choose the direction. Black should choose different variations depending on the specific board situation. However, when we analyze this with AI, we find that AI believes black's bump and hang at the bottom is inferior or simply bad compared to choosing the hang on the other side. Let's use a specific opening to explain this move. Alright? Among human players, there used to be a very common opening. It features a star point large knight's enclosure. White makes a corner approach and black pincers. This was a relatively popular sequence for humans in the past. When white plays the underneath attachment, should black choose to hang on the left or bump at the bottom? The previous human understanding was that black should bump at the bottom. The reason is that if black chooses to hang on the left after white jumps out, this hard head poses a threat to black's influence on the right, or the development of black's framework on the right. We didn't want white to form a hard head here, so we would choose to bump and hang at the bottom. However, looking at it with AI considers this variation to be a loss for black. AI believes that even with the coordination issues, black should still play the hang on the left. If black chooses to bump and hang here, then white should opt for the small avalanche variation. Since the latter is unfavorable here, black can only choose the tiger's mouth. Then, white chooses the attachment and solid extension sequence. Next up, black makes a solid extension and white blocks. If black attaches here, white hangs out. AI believes this result is significantly better for white. So the point I want to emphasize here is that after the high approach and underneath attachment at the 3 to 4 point, in the human era, choosing between the hang and the bump and hang depended entirely on the direction. However, AI believes the hang is fundamentally superior to the bump and hang. So, to give a brief summary. First, after a one-space high approach and underneath attachment at the 3 to 4 point, Black's bump and Hayne to choose the avalanche pattern is decreasing in popularity or being gradually phased out by AI. AI considers this variation to be a loss and suggests choosing the Hayne variation instead. Then, when the avalanche pattern is chosen, the biggest change is in the small avalanche. White's Hayne is actually favorable. When white turns if black has a favorable ladder, black can make a solid extension and the fight is roughly 50-50. But if black's ladder is unfavorable and black must play the tiger's mouth instead of the solid extension, white's attachment on top makes this pattern favorable for white. Alright, that concludes the content for today's lesson.